I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Let's talk about the real art of the deal, and I'm not talking about the bloviating traitor who rants and raves on his social media platform and thinks that that is how you conduct diplomacy. Quite the contrary. I want to talk about what President Biden did to shame MAGA Republicans into changing their plan, where they wanted to cut Medicare, cut Social Security, cut veterans benefits, and cut other programs that Americans not only rely on, but programs that Americans paid into and were obligated to receive, that MAGA Republicans wanted to put on the chopping blocks or privatize or engage in whatever the schemes MAGA Republicans like to do. So, of course, you know that during the State of the Union, President Biden called out MAGA Republicans for their plan, because multiple MAGA Republicans have plans to cut Social Security. One such MAGA Republican is Rick Scott, the MAGA Republican senator from Florida, who happens to be a leader. He's not just any senator. By the way, a senator is a high-level position nonetheless, but Rick Scott runs the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee. You don't get much higher than that, and his plan was to sunset all government programs within 5 years. Here, let's just pull up what his program said. All federal legislation sunsets in 5 years. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again. That absolutely would apply to veterans benefits, Social Security, Medicare, and the list goes on. President Biden called that out. The MAGA Republicans were like, oh, well, that's not our plan. By the way, we've showed you here before on the MeidasTouch Network. You can go back and watch our podcasts and all our other videos, but there's like dozens of other videos and statements. Dozens would be an understatement of MAGA Republicans talking about cutting or privatizing Social Security. There are statements that they made within the past 2 weeks. Everybody from former Vice President Pence and others have been going out and saying that. But because President Biden has taken on the offense and has made these issues crystal clear about what MAGA Republicans are trying to do, MAGA Republicans backed down. This is truly the art of the deal that protects American people, that protects the 99% of America, and doesn't just protect the 1% billionaires and decamillionaires out there. Rick Scott and the MAGA Republicans changed the plan, because here's what the plan now says that Rick Scott put forward today. You'll compare the one I just showed you, compare it with this. All federal legislation sunsets in 5 years with the specific exceptions of Social Security, Medicare, National Security, veterans benefits, and other essential services. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again. So you see, the MAGA Republicans now specifically added language for exceptions: Social Security, Medicare, National Security, veterans benefits, and other essential services, because they've been shamed into it. Here is White House press secretary basically responding to Rick Scott editing the plan and saying that President Biden would like to congratulate Rick Scott for acknowledging he has, in fact, been attempting to put Medicare and Social Security on the chopping block. Here, play this clip.
Is about Rick Scott. As you saw, he edited his policy plan on sunsetting federal programs after 5 years to say it now exempts Social Security and Medicare. He says to the president, to Democratic and Republican leaders, that it was never intended to refer to Social Security and Medicare. And the White House's view, does that end this conversation? Is the discussion over this issue done?
What do you think? So I thought you would ask this question, so I have a couple of things to say to the senator. So I'll first say this, that the president congratulates Senator Scott on joining the post-State of the Union red wave, as we have seen from Republicans, acknowledging that they are, in fact, been attempting to put Medicare and Social Security on the chopping block, because that's what they are actually saying, that they were indeed attempting to do that. So for the past year, and we have the facts, the past year he has explained the absence of an exception by saying, if it's worth keeping, we're going to keep it. But make no mistake, his true colors are undeniable and on the record. They have been speaking at both sides of their mouths here. That's what Republicans in the Senate and Congress more broadly have been doing. Cutting Medicaid and Social Security benefits is a long-standing passion of Senator Scott's, as it is for a majority of the House Republicans who comprise the Republican Study Committee and many of his Senate colleagues, ranging from John Thune and to Ron Johnson. And so, for example, in 1990s, Senator Scott supported fully privatizing authorizing Medicare. And let's not forget, just weeks ago, they all said and were saying that they wanted to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. By doing that, you certainly it would be one of the biggest cut to Medicare benefits if you were to do that. And let's not forget, the Inflation Reduction Act actually cuts down the deficit by $200 billion. So we thank Senator Scott for continuing to share his heart with the world. And we, with that, I'll just leave it there.
And just so you remember, this is what Rick Scott said when he was confronted by Fox. Actually, this was a decent interview that was done by Fox where Rick Scott, it's just a Democratic talking point. And even Fox said, no, this is in your plan. This is in your plan. Here, just so you could remember, play this clip.
Recently put out an 11-point plan to rescue America, two of the big points of which are, quote, all Americans should pay some income tax to have skin in the game, even if a small amount. Currently, over half of Americans pay no income tax. It also says all federal legislation sunsets in 5 years. If a law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again. So that would raise taxes on half of Americans and potentially sunset programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Why would you propose something like that in an election year?
Sure. Well, John, that's, of course, the Democrat talking points. It's a 11-step plan.
No, it's in the plan. It's in the plan.
Let's think about reality for a second. First of all, let's talk about Medicare.
But Senator, hang on.
John.
So it's not a Democratic talking point. It's in the plan.
And also in the plan, it says we ought to every year talk about exactly how we're going to fix Medicare and Social.
And here was President Biden in a speech earlier in the week before Rick Scott backed off and changed the plan, basically saying Rick Scott is just making things up, folks. Rick Scott is trying to cut your Social Security. He's trying to cut your Medicare. And I think that Rick Scott's a bit confused here. Rick Scott says that I'm cutting prescription drug costs, and that means I'm cutting Medicare. I think he's a little confused. Here, play this clip.
By the way, we're on the topic of Medicare. The distinguished senator, and I mean, I shouldn't be smart guy, Senator Rick Scott from Florida, who is responsible for getting Republicans elected to the Senate, is a little bit in hot water right now. Because his plan is to sunset Medicare and Social Security. Well, meaning if you don't reauthorize them every 5 years, they go out of existence. Sunset them. They'll go away. As I said in the State of the Union, if anyone tries to get rid of Social Security or Medicare, I will veto it. If that's the Republican dream, I'm their nightmare. Look, folks, you saw when I said that on the floor, maybe if you saw it, you saw when I said that on the floor, I said, no, liar, hey, I said, that means you're not going to cut Medicare or Social Security? And they all stood up and started to clap. I said, well, we got to settle then. Remember? No, seriously. Well, it's all on film. Let's see who votes to cut it. Look, and here's Rick Scott's response to this. He says that because I'm cutting prescription drug costs, that means I'm cutting Medicare. Where's he been? I think he's a little confused.
And here's another great clip. This is of President Biden again earlier in the week. You're seeing him going on the offense here, mocking congressional Republicans who called him a liar for saying some Republicans want to sunset Social Security and Medicare. And here Biden's reading directly from quotes from Rick Scott and Ron Johnson. Here, play this clip.
They seem shocked when I raised the plans of some of their members and their caucus to cut Social Security. And Marjorie Taylor Greene and others stood up and said, liar, liar. Reminds me of liar, liar, house on fire, yeah. Well, guess what? You know, I remind you that Rick Scott from Florida, the guy who ran the U.S. Senate campaign, has a plan. I got his brochure right here. Has a plan. Here's what he says in his plan. Let me open it up here. Sorry. He says, all federal legislation sunsets every 5 years. If the law is worth keeping, Congress can pass it again. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And by the way, you have a senator named Ron Johnson. Ron Johnson on Social Security and Medicare, quote, "We should transfer everything, so we have to consider everything every year."
This is a statement from David Jolly in response to Rick Scott and the MAGA Republicans changing their plan. David Jolly writes, "It would seem Rick Scott's embarrassing reversal on Medicare and Social Security can only be interpreted as a huge political victory for Joe Biden. Going into debt ceiling talks, Republicans have now been castrated on the issue. Just a remarkably quick victory by the president." And look, people like Rick Scott, they want to sunset your Social Security. Their goal is to privatize it so people like Rick Scott can basically steal your money, because that's what they want to do. And you go, "Oh, Ben, you're saying Rick Scott steals money?" Rick Scott, who wants to cut Medicare, who wants to cut your Social Security, when he was running a company, the Columbian Hospital and the Hospital Corporation of America, how he got all of his money running those corporations back in the 1990s up until 2000, and he got a golden parachute to leave. Those corporations were convicted on 14 felony counts for engaging in the largest Medicare fraud scam at the time. Let me repeat that. Rick Scott, who currently leads the MAGA Republicans in the Senate fundraising for the Senatorial Campaign Committee, so he's one of the main leaders of the Republicans, a Republican senator. He made his money leading a company that was convicted on 14 felony counts for the largest Medicare fraud in American history and had to pay a $1.6 billion fine. And then Rick Scott left with a golden parachute. This is the individual who wants to tell you what you should do with your Medicare and how you should handle Social Security. They want to take that from you. This is Rick Scott for you, folks. And I'm glad that we have someone in President Biden who could stand up to these bullies and crooks and criminals and corrupt individuals who make up the modern-day MAGA Republican Party. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers, thanks to your incredible support. So please hit subscribe now. In addition to hitting the subscribe, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. You will love the exclusive content we have on our Patreon, but most importantly, it helps grow this independent media platform. So check us out, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Remember to hit subscribe right now.
Our blue wall stopped the red wave and election deniers got denied election. That's why we're celebrating with the new Democracy Prevails team. We've got lots of work to do, but we should all be proud that when democracy was tested, democracy prevailed. You've earned this. Don't wait. Get yours right now at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.